All right, I'm Ali Velshi in for Lawrence O'Donnell. The President of the United States loves to talk about breaking records, but he will not be bragging about the record that he broke today. President Trump's disapproval is now the highest it has ever been in the Washington Post ABC News poll. For the first time, 60% of Americans disapprove of the job that Donald Trump is doing as president, and more than half of Americans, 53%, strongly disapprove of the job Donald Trump is doing. Meanwhile, less than a quarter strongly approve of the president. It was just yesterday that the president told Bloomberg that Democrats can't impeach him because he's doing a, quote, great job. The poll shows Americans not only don't think Donald Trump is doing a great job, it shows that nearly half, 49%, want Congress to begin impeachment proceedings against him. Also, while Trump calls Robert Mueller's probe a witch hunt, Americans apparently disagree. 63% support the Mueller probe, just 29% oppose it. Those numbers coming a day after the president threatened to get involved in the Department of Justice, which is overseeing Robert Mueller's probe.
Our Justice Department and our FBI have to start doing their job and doing it right and doing it now. What's happening is a disgrace. And at some point, I wanted to stay out, but at some point, if it doesn't straighten out properly, I want them to do their job. I will get involved and I'll get in there if I have to. Disgraceful.
At some point, listen to that, at some point, if it doesn't straighten out possibly, if the probe into me doesn't straighten out in a way I want, I will have to get involved. Number after number after number in the new Washington Post poll shows a warning to the president about his unpopularity. And it comes on the same day that the president of the United States found himself excluded from the ceremonies to remember Senator John McCain. The president is not invited, pointedly not invited, to Senator McCain's funeral on Saturday. But even in his absence, there were reminders of Donald Trump's legal jeopardy as his chief of staff, John Kelly, stood alongside Rod Rosenstein, the man overseeing the Russia investigation, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who has faced so much pressure from the president to unrecuse himself in the Mueller probe. Well, they were all on hand to honor the former Senate colleague, John McCain. The president spent the day dealing with new fallout in his trade war with Canada after his disparaging remarks about the United States ally leaked out. The Toronto Star's Daniel Dale, who will join us later this hour, reported that in an off-the-record portion of the president's interview with Bloomberg, Donald Trump said that he's not making any compromises at all in the talks with Canada, but he cannot say this publicly because, quote, it's going to be so insulting that they are not going to be able to make a deal, end quote. Canadian officials saw that as proof that the president is not negotiating in good faith as he threatens to exclude Canada from a new trade deal. They reportedly confronted the U.S. delegation over that report today. Here was the president's response at an event in Charlotte.
When you say off the record, that's it's not a legal term, but it's a term of honor. They said, President Trump said off the record, and then they go on to this. I said, this is a first. These are very dishonorable people. But I said, in the end, it's okay, because at least Canada knows how I feel. So it's fine. It's fine. It's true.
Well, at least Canada knows how he feels. And the president made this threat to Canada.
And if we don't make a deal with Canada, that's just fine. But we'll see how it all works out. I say affectionately, we'll just have to tariff those cars coming in. That's a lot of money coming into the coffers of the United States.
Tariff the cars that are made by American car companies with factories in Canada. And a Republican-appointed federal judge in Texas dealt the president a blow today on immigration, declining to order an immediate halt to the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. Texas and 7 other states had sued to stop DACA, which is the Obama-era initiative that has allowed more than 700,000 young people known as Dreamers to avoid deportation. Joining us now is Jonathan Alter, the columnist for The Daily Beast and an MSNBC political analyst. Also joining us is Michael Tomasky, a special correspondent for The Daily Beast, and Neera Tanden, president of the American Center, or for the Center of American Progress. She was Hillary Clinton's policy director during the 2008 presidential campaign. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being with us, not just on a Friday night, but a holiday Friday night. There's a lot to deal with here. Neera, let's start with the DACA decision. Things are not going the president's way in terms of DACA. The president, this judge put out a long report in which he agreed that the Obama administration may not have had the authority to implement DACA, but he did not agree to suspend this as was requested.
Absolutely. And I think the news here really is that the White House has really tried to use immigration issues across the board as part of really a campaign strategy. I think they saw overturning DACA at this point in time, a judge overturning DACA as an opportunity to make this another issue in the campaign, just like they tried to have their failed family separation policy as something that was helping them. And honestly, I think the federal judge has really taken that away from them. And despite the fact that the GOP is running basically anti-immigrant ads everywhere, I think that is going to fail when fuel like this is taken away from them.
Jonathan, of the assembled crowd, you and I are old enough to remember when NAFTA came to be, and before that, the free trade agreement with Canada, and the fact that that came of the auto pact between Canada and the United States, which was a very active decision to create assembly in Canada for American company cars at the time. The president's treading on dangerous water here. He torpedoes the talks with the Canadians and then says the answer will be to tax cars coming in from Canada. That ultimately shows a poor understanding of basic economics.
It does, and Canada is our biggest trading partner. A big chunk of the U.S. economy depends on that relationship. So he's playing with dynamite here. He's got Jared Kushner negotiating against Chrystia Freeland, who some viewers might remember from when she appeared often on MSNBC and
Correct.
CNBC.
She was a colleague of ours.
Tremendously bright and talented foreign minister of Canada. And, she got handed a real advantageous piece of information today. So she has a lot of leverage over Trump. And one thing that nobody has even mentioned is that the deal requires Canada's participation. In other words, by law, the United States cannot make a separate deal with Mexico and leave Canada out, which has not been mentioned.
Michael, I think most surprising was what the president said, where he said if this thing doesn't straighten itself out, referring to the Russia probe, he'll have to get involved with the Justice Department. That's more than he's said. He's made that kind of comment before, but that's more serious than this is a witch hunt. I don't like it. It's unfair. There's no collusion. I have to get involved in the Justice Department is not the Commerce Department. It's not the Department of Labor. It's not. It's different from the executive branches. The president threatening to get involved is dangerous.
Well, it's very dangerous, and it's not going to work very well for him. I have news for him. So to return to the poll numbers, Ali, that you started the segment with, this poll is, perhaps it's an outlier because the numbers are much worse than other recent polls. On the other hand, perhaps it's the first poll to take in the full sort of psychic response of Americans to everything that has happened in the last couple of weeks. The Cohen plea, the Manafort verdict, and subsequent developments since then. Americans don't pay attention to the specifics the way the four of us do, but they pay attention to the broad things. They pay attention to the big things that happen. The stunning number in that poll is the 53% strong disapproval. I don't think that I've ever seen in my adult lifetime, and John and Neera can check me, I don't think I've ever seen a strong disapproval of the president above 50% in my adult lifetime. And if he were to try something along the lines you're suggesting, Ali, especially with those numbers in the poll that show the 63% support for the Mueller investigation. There's another number that you didn't cite. 53% believe that Trump probably obstructed justice.
Let's put that up, because I think this is important. That's another 53 there. 53%. The question was, do you think Trump has tried to interfere with the Mueller probe in a way that constitutes obstructing justice? It's a very specific question, Michael. It's not a random, do you think he meddled in it? 53% said yes. 35% said no. That 35% continues to be a base that the president enjoys. Until he said he can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, he's
Right.
probably still got that 35%.
Yeah, but the 53 stuck out to me, Ali, and that was higher than I would have expected it to be by 7, 8, maybe even 10 points. And that shows that if he were to try something like you suggested, that would be big trouble for him.
Neera, go ahead, Neera.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about this poll is, basically Donald Trump has been attacking the Mueller probe and undermining the probe and attacking the honesty and veracity of both Mueller himself as well as the whole process. He's obviously trying to make the American people think that there's something wrong here. And what's really happened, this poll demonstrates, and I think Michael's right, that this may just be the beginning of a hardening of public opinion post-Manafort and
post-Manafort.
But
That's
what's
right.
really, what I think is happening here is this entire strategy of Donald Trump's has backfired. You could look at a person, a common criminal, who attacks the prosecutor all the time, who tries to undermine it and say, that person looks guilty. And if you see this 53% number, it's basically the American people saying, his behavior is confirming in front of our eyes that he's guilty. A lot of pundits have said this is a smart strategy to kind of undermine the investigation because his base is hard. That's true. But with independents, it has truly backfired. And I have news for the Republican Party. It is not just Republicans who are going to be voting this November as Democrats, but a lot of independents as well. And
this is interesting because this starts to reflect. In fact, when you look back at 1973, this starts to reflect something that people are really turning. And Republicans back then only decided that they were turning on Richard Nixon when they realized the public was turning on them. Let's look at another piece of this poll. This is after the Manafort verdict. The question of whether Trump should pardon Manafort. 66% oppose and 18% support. 18%, that's almost half as much as he typically gets. So even people in his base, even people who turn away from Donald Trump for nothing that he does, are saying, come on, this is actually a bridge too far. It's hard to know, Jonathan, what the bridge too far is with Donald Trump, but for some people, this is it. 18%
believe the world is flat. You can get 18% for anything. So that is a really, really low number. And I think there are a number of other things that have happened in the last few weeks. I mean, we haven't mentioned John McCain. He just beat Donald Trump in a landslide, even though he was, he had died. And the contrast there, I think, was very, very powerful in the last 10 days when they were in the field with that poll. And so you had a lot of Republicans and independents who outnumbered Democrats and Republicans in this poll. They are now the #1 political force in this country by about 7 or 8 points. More people identify themselves as independents than Democrats, than Republicans, bringing up the rear. And the various things that they're trying to do on the Republican side to rally their base are not working. For instance, they thought that they were going to turn a young woman who was tragically killed in Iowa, Molly Tibbetts, they thought they were going to turn her into a household word. And before, she'd even been buried, Newt Gingrich was politicizing this. Then Molly Tibbetts' father comes out at the funeral and says, we don't blame the Latinos in Iowa. They're part of our family, part of our community. And it completely took that issue away from them, what they were expecting to run on this fall.
Michael, watching the services for John McCain, now this is a guy, let's not kid ourselves as we continue to venerate him, as I have done. He's a man who's had his failings. And by the way, he was a conservative. He absolutely was. And yet it showed us in this last few days what an independent spirit brings to whatever your political persuasion is and what this country can be if we are prepared to listen to each other, if we're prepared to make compromises. It has been a sort of a celebration of the fact that maybe that is not dead in our political spirit.
That's right. And it doesn't have that much to do with politics, or it transcends politics. He lived an honorable life. Whether you agree with his politics or not, he lived an honorable life. And then there are those who haven't lived such an honorable life. I bet you they're hiding Donald Trump's smartphone tonight at the White House because he's going to be watching that tomorrow.
Yep.
And he's going to be boiling, and he's going to want to be tweeting, and they're going to want to keep him well away from that phone of his so he doesn't tweet anything.
I think that would be an interesting thing if it were to happen. Thank you for joining me on this Friday night. Jonathan Alter, Michael Tomasky, Neera Tanden. I appreciate it.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.